in Beaumont aim to help kids with type 1 diabetes. I know we can do this. We're stronger together.
Thank you, Lily, for your support of the JDRF Type 1 Nation Summits. You are helping millions of Americans, including me. Together we can end type 1 diabetes. We are stronger together.
Hello, everybody. I'm Tammy Duquette, Associate Executive Director for JDRF, Michigan and Northwest Ohio chapter. I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight for our Type 1 Nation Summit. For the first time, we're virtual. It's kind of the space that we're in right now. We weren't able to come to you live like we wanted to, live and in person. So we thought, let's do it virtually so that we can still give you some great information, have you still be a part of the community and sharing. So this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to bring up, hang on one second while I bring up my screen. Okay, one second. Okay, so tonight we've got 740 attendees registered for 5 countries and 29 states. I think that's pretty wonderful. There are people from all over tonight. So I want to welcome you all. And of course, it's not moving for me. Hang on. To the Type 1 Nation Summit. Come on. Hold on. Yes, this is live. There we go. Okay. So if you haven't yet, send your kids over to Facebook Live. From 6 to 7 tonight, we've got some fun in store for them. I believe tonight is yoga, and I think it's going to have an animal theme to it. So I think that's pretty wonderful. But also, while your kids are off and stuck at home, Ford Motor Company has created some great activity pages for your kids. I went over there to look at them and they're pretty fun. I like to color a lot, so I'll probably be printing some. Whenever I mention something that has a link, my co-host Jillian is going to be putting that in for you into the chat room, and I'll be telling you about that in just a minute. But before we do that, I would like for Jillian, and hang on one second, I've got to make Denise able to show herself, so give me 1 second here. This is our third night. You would think by now I remember these things, but yeah, I don't. 1 second. 1 second. Let me find Denise and bring her over so she can say hello. There she is. Whoops, where'd you go? Okay, Denise and Jillian, if you would turn off your cameras and join us. Denise, you might still not be able to. Give me 1 more second. There we go. So if Denise and Jillian would join us.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Are you guys there?
I'm trying to join you
There's
guys in my
Denise.
video.
And turn on, oh, you got your mute off. Jillian, where are you?
I'm here. I just can't see you.
Well, Jillian's staying hidden on me, but that's okay. So Denise, as you all know, is usually the one that puts on the Type 1 Nation Summit, and she did this year as well. She's the one that worked with her committee, who we are very grateful for, and was able to put it all together. And then we had to switch it to virtual, and that's where I came in because I am the tech person around here. So I got to take this on, and it's been great fun. It's been a lot of learning this week. And along with me, I've got Jillian Brenneman, who decided to show herself. Jillian is here in the background, making sure everything runs okay. She's answering things in the chat room. She's putting links for you. Watch throughout the night because there's some extra links that she's going to be putting up there as well. Thank you, ladies, both for jumping in. You can both jump back off now.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye.
And I need to do one more thing and go back again. There we go. Okay, so come on. So I want to do some basic housekeeping with you tonight to make it more active for you. As you can tell, you're muted and your video is off because there are a lot of you online, and it gets very hectic if we can see everybody. So we make it so that we just see the presenters. But there's a couple of things you can do because we most certainly want you to engage with us. If you hover at the bottom of your screen, some boxes will come up, one of which is the chat. And the chat is a wonderful way to talk to the other attendees, you know, share stories, share your experiences, you know, make comments for the panelists, but not questions. The questions for the panelists, you want to pick up the Q&A button, and that opens a box for you to ask questions of the panelists. That's the one that we're going to use to pick up your questions. They won't necessarily see them if you put them in the chat. So please put them in the Q&A, and we'll be able to answer them and use that chat. And you can swap around your presentation and speaker view. If you find this in your upper right corner and you play around with it, this part right here, you'll find different views. Like you can see the presenters bigger. You can make it look like the Brady Bunch, for those of you old enough to know that. You can make the presentation they have up bigger or smaller. So just play around with it. You can't break anything. And then be social with us. put our hashtags out there on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever you use, Snapchat. The hashtags you want to use tonight: Type 1 Nation, Stronger Together, and JDRF. Use those as you tell everybody about what you're doing. Take a picture of your screen, put it out on social media. And then what you can also do is put a link to our YouTube page, because we're streaming live right now. While we're here with you on Zoom, before I started, I also put us out to YouTube. So if somebody did not sign up in time for tonight to get the link, send them the link to YouTube, put it out on your social media, and they can just go to YouTube and watch. We had quite a few people on there last night, actually. And if you see me that I keep looking this way, I have 3 computers in front of me and I have to look to different ones for what we need to do. Lend us your voice. We need advocates. We need people that can go to their representatives, that can send them the emails that we put together, and tell them what we need. Fight for the T1D community. Very easy to do. It really doesn't take any time at all. Every so often, we will send you, an email or a text saying, hey, can you call your representative and say this, or can you send this specific email or letter? And to do that, visit jdrf.org/join. And again, Jillian will put that in the chat box for you. And we want to thank our healthcare heroes. Right now is a pretty tough time for people working in hospitals, trying to take care of all of those that are there and those with COVID-19. They're there on the front lines working hard every day. And then there are our fire personnel and police, people working in the grocery stores and gas stations so that we can stay home and healthy. We want to say thank you to all of them. So join us online. So as you know, we can't see you in person right now. And but we do want to see you. And our gala, all the way through at least the end of June, we've decided not to do any in-person events to keep our T1D community safe. But we're still going to have our gala. We could not have a year without it. So our Grand Rapids Gala and our Promise Ball have joined forces to do one big night on June 4th. And they are going to have a silent auction with some amazing items. They're going to have a live auction. And they are also going to have some fun and some inspiration, and anyone can join. It's free to join it this year. Anyone can go online and watch it on June 4th. You're going to be able to bid for auction items online, and you'll see when someone's outbidding you. It'll send you an alert. It's pretty fun to do. There's quite a few things that I actually want to do on it. And I want to say thank you to our presenting sponsor, Ford. Ford Motor Company is not just a presenting sponsor of our galas. They are our partner throughout the year for over 20 years. In fact, no corporate partner has done more to fund JDRF research than our very own Ford. Over $70 million to date. I want to share a thank you message that our president and CEO, Aaron Kowalski, recently sent out to the Ford employees. Hold on. I did it again. Hold on. One second. Jillian, can you let me know if you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Tammy.
Julia, can you unmute and let me know if you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
All right. All right, were you guys able to hear me that whole time?
Yes.
You have been able to hear me up until now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, now I'm going to play this. Hold on, I got to start again. All right, were you guys able to hear me that whole time?
Begin to say thank you. Your support is making it so much better for me, Edsel Ford's son, and the more than 1.6 million people with type 1 diabetes to live every day, and to advance research that will cure this disease. There's no way to express the depth of our thanks. Please know how much of an impact.
Hold on. I realize what's happening right now is YouTube sound is playing at the same time. I'm sorry, this is, as you can tell, this is incredibly live, definitely not dubbed.
Each of you is having.
So now I'm going to start this again. It's not a night if I don't have something mess up. Okay, here we go.
How do we even begin to say thank you? Your support at Ford is making it so much better for me, Edsel Ford's son, and the more than 1.6 million people with type 1 diabetes to live every day, and to advance research that will cure this disease. There's no way to express the depth of our thanks. Please know how much of an impact each of you is having, and know that together we will cure T1D.
All right. JDRF One Walk is going to be here before we know it. And I'm really hoping that we're going to be together in person and not virtual. And so we need you to get online and register. It's time. Jillian, Crystal, Sarah, April, and I all want you to get online and register your teams for the JDRF One Walk. We've got our 5 walks coming to you this fall. You'll notice East Lansing is way later than normal. We originally had it in August, and that made us a little nervous. And so the next available date we were able to get was October 24th. So we're going to have a beautiful fall day in East Lansing. So it is National Volunteer Week, and we want to say thank you to all of our volunteers, all of you here with us today, and the hundreds and thousands of volunteers that help us each and every day, each and every week. We are stronger together. So thank you to every one of our volunteers. All of you are key to our fundraising efforts. But with many of JDRF's biggest spring fundraising events canceled or postponed, the funding of future research is in jeopardy. In order to meet this challenge, we are asking our supporters who are able to contribute to our Fund a Cure program. Fund a Cure provides JDRF with the dollars needed to move therapies and technologies out of the lab and into the waiting hands of the T1D community. Although these are uncertain times when so many things seem beyond our control, there is one thing we can control and take pride in, and that is ensuring JDRF's mission to cure type 1 diabetes continues. Our Youth Ambassador, Kendall, would like to tell you how your donations have helped her live a healthier and more robust life.
Hi, my name is Kendall Chamberlain and I have T1D. Thanks to donations to JDRF from people like you, I am able to be more independent. I participate in many school activities. I also perform in dance and theater. Since I was diagnosed at 7, my treatment has gotten easier to manage. I now use a CGM to monitor my sugar and an insulin pump that delivers insulin throughout the day. The continued support means that our lives
All right. So I wanted to mention, usually we use a JDRF backdrop, but I decided I wanted to use one from where I'm from because I know there are some of you here from other states and even other countries. And I am right now in my apartment in Detroit, Michigan. And that's the Ambassador Bridge behind me. I have a view of it out my window. It's not quite the view. I actually went down to the water to take that picture, but I do have a beautiful view that I get to look at every night. And so I thought I'd put that behind me instead. We're going to get ready for our next presentation, but before we do, I'm going to do a poll because our speakers wanted to know something about you. So I'm going to put a poll up right now, and then you're going to be able to click on it and answer, and we'll be able to see as you're answering what your answers are. I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds to answer. If somebody hasn't answered yet, go ahead and plug your answer in there. And Julia and Mallory, take note. And now you can also unmute and turn on your video. All right, I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share the final results. And it looks like the majority of you are here longer than 3 years or have a child or your connection that's longer than 3 years. We've got a few of you less than 6 months. This is going to be a great presentation for you. And it will be for all of you, really. I'm going to take this off now. And so Julia Mulvane and Mallory, I don't have it in front of me, Mallory Jacobs, I'm sorry, is about to go talk to you about tips and tricks from one T1D mom to another, and it's actually from two T1D moms to another. I'm going to turn my video and off and mute, and you guys can take it away. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. And Julia, thank you for making our kids camp happen.
You are very welcome. Hi, everyone. Give me quite a second here. Here we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Mulvane, and Mallory Jacobs is my co-host today. And these are our two beautiful T1 children here on the front slide. My name is Julia. I am a T1 mom to Rachel, who's age 13, and Beth Ann, who's age 17. I've been married to my husband for 18 years. Rachel was diagnosed at age 8. For JDRF, I am the Type 1 Nation Summit Kids Camp Chair for 3 years now, the Teen Central Chair for 2 years, and the Virtual Kids Camp Chair for this year. I've also been a new family outreach volunteer for the last 4 years, although the name has changed many times over the years. I've also volunteered for the JDRF Gala for the last 2 years. And I am a medical paraprofessional in the Utica Community Schools for 2 Type 1s. One is in kindergarten and one is in 1st grade. I became a JDRF volunteer because I never want another family to feel as alone as we did that first few days following diagnosis. Anyone who knows me knows that I have said JDRF is my therapy, and I feel like that I'm doing something for my daughter with every event that I volunteer for. So the online community for JDRF is an amazing thing. And this list is compiled of from many of my friends on the online community that I've asked for help for. I had a new mom ask me recently, what are some things that they would suggest for when they first come home after diagnosis? And so these are some of the things that they suggested. Rufus, so always make sure that you've asked for your bag of hope and you got your Rufus doll. A sling bag to carry your stuff, juice boxes. Juicy Juice makes a 15 card count juice box, so that's great to have around. A calculator to calculate all of your ratios, a food scale, the mini pop cans, some low carb and no carb snacks, and there's a few listed there. The book or the app called Calorie King. I know that first month or so, I lived looking into that book all the time. And I know Mallory is going to talk about that book later on as well. Some measuring spoons and cups, because you need to learn what a serving actually looks like. And so those measuring spoons and those measuring cups come in great handy. Same thing with Ziploc bags so that you can portion out your snacks. Sharps containers. A lot of cities, and they're hard to come by, the red ones that you can purchase, but there's no way to dispose of them. So a lot of cities will tell you to just use regular containers and to tape them and then dispose of them. In our house, we use the Parmesan cheese containers. I keep them in my camper. We take them with us when we go traveling to hotels, and they're perfect to put everything in. You can leave them on the counter. Nobody's going to bother them. Or your liquid laundry containers or milk jugs are also great things to use. Hold on to the lid, tape it all up, mark it as a sharp, throw it in your trash. I like to use these gum containers that are in the middle here. They're the extra gum. That's what they look like there. And they hold 8 syringes and a whole bunch of the pen needles. And they're great to throw in your backpack so that you, or your sling bag or your purse or your diaper bag, you don't have to worry about them coming off. I keep one in the bag that I use for my type 1s at school. And one says new and one says used. And so if I'm giving a correction in the hallway to one of my students, I can put it in the used and then dump it later into the bigger container. These Zip Fizz containers, many teachers that I know use them to get through the day. And if you ask them, they'll save them for you. But if you wash them out and peel the labels off, they hold 10 Skittles. And so that is a great thing to throw in the bottom of your bag or your purse or your backpack or your gym bag, because we all know those bags get wet and the Skittles bags, they disintegrate. So if you use these, you can keep 10 in there at all times. They're great. In doing that, we've also learned some other things that we can use to hold things. A travel toothbrush holder holds honey sticks. They're great to use for a quick pick-me-up for stubborn lows that don't want to come up. So we use a travel toothbrush holder. Those glucose tubes, my daughters particularly did not like the taste of them, but the tubes can hold the Smarties that you can find at, I know around here, Five Below sells them as well as the dollar store. And they hold 10 of them and they're the same size and the same carbs as the glucose tabs, and they taste a little better. And they also hold quarters, which is a good thing now that my daughter's in junior high and getting ready to go to high school. She can buy pop from the machine if she needed it for a low, and now she can carry the quarters. Again, we use them in our camper for when we're camping as well. Another good tip is the picture here with the glucose shot and the Ritz crackers. We keep them next to our daughter's bed at night, so she has a supply next to her bed. And we know that if I give her a glucose shot and 2 of these crackers, it's going to bring her up to 180, a good number. I can go back to bed and I know it's going to work. So find what works for you, for your child, and keep them next to their bed. So at night when you're half asleep, you're not scrambling to find it. Once your child's on a pump, I do this every single month when her supplies come in. I sit down and I make a bag using the bag that came from my supply company for various different things. It's a Ziploc bag, and I put everything that she needs to change her site in it. It has her infusion set, her cartridge, a needle, the syringe, skin tack, Unisolve, and an alcohol prep pad. This is great for in the middle of the night site changes. It's great for her. She's 13, so she's able to just grab everything and go. It makes traveling a whole lot easier because I know if we're going to be gone for so many days, however many I need to take. Diabetes Supply Central looks different in every house. These are a few pictures that I stole from some friends off of Facebook, and mine and Mallory's as well. And it's whatever works for you in your house. In our house, I use the colored stations there, the drawers, they all are labeled. Everything goes in there. I bought it at Hobby Lobby. We had fun picking that out. The Cheryl here uses a kitchen cabinet or underneath a bathroom sink. Lacey, a very good friend of mine, sorry Lacey, she uses a closet and they just put everything in their closet there. And Mallory has said that they use the top of a dresser drawer to put some of the things in. I've seen kitchen cabinet drawers. I've seen lots and lots of things. So whatever works for you, but these are just some different places that friends of ours use. Lacey again gave us some travel tips here. In their house, they do a lot of traveling. So they'll keep a 1 week packing list supply that's already typed up in their closet so that anybody can walk in there and then just figure out grab how much stuff that they need to grab. In our house, we have this bag on the bottom corner here that sits right next to it. And it's got everything that we need for 2 complete site changes. And so we can just grab it and go if there's an emergency or she's going to spend the night at grandma and grandpa's. I know that she can just take that bag and it's got everything in it that she needs. The medicine bottle here at the top is just an old medicine bottle of mine. I took off the label. I stuck a cotton ball in the bottom of it and I put our insulin in it and it's great to travel. We keep it in the refrigerator that way, so that if it falls out, it doesn't break, because we all know love the smell of that insulin. So this will allow us to not have it break. And again, this is the first thing I do with my students at school when they send me their insulin back and forth, is I grab one of these bottles. This container here on the bottom is the insulated bag. It was actually a Girl Scout project that somebody had passed out to all of the diabetics in our district, and it only holds insulin. So when we start getting ready to travel, we pull it out, we stick it on the counter, and we know that if that's still sitting on the counter, we haven't grabbed everything that we need to have. So we know that that has to have the insulin in it. On the left here, this calculated spreadsheet is something that I created for anyone who cared for my daughter. We would send it with her, and it's a step-by-step instruction sheet of how to calculate insulin. And it's simply put in the numbers and they follow the steps down. At the end of mine and Mallory's presentation tonight is our contact information. If anybody would like me to send this to them, I'd be more than happy to do so. And the other thing I wanted to say is Rachel and I would go to the classrooms at the beginning of every year during elementary, and we would read to her classmates her Rufus book and show them her supplies and answer any questions that they would have. We'd then send in a quick little note home to each of their families, letting them know our contact information in case they had any questions. We found that this helped the kids to not treat her any differently, and including one of her teachers in 4th or 5th grade made it a game every time her high alarm would go off. She had changed on her Dexcom to be one of the dancing ones. And so every time it would go off, they would stop and do a dance break. So they loved doing that and they thought it was fun. Now in this picture here, Rachel goes to school with me and she reads books to the classmates of my current T1s. Here on the left is a picture from another friend of mine on Facebook that she created that has everything labeled. And it's a photo that she took of everything that she sends to school with her child. And she keeps it in her supply bag so that they know what her child should have. I do the similar. And here on the right is a Ziploc bag that goes everywhere. Every gym my daughter is in, every coach, every classroom, every family member has one of these little Ziploc bags tucked in their pantries or wherever. And it allows our families and our friends to not have to worry about what is going on with them. And they don't have to worry about if Rachel has a low, she could just go into their pantry and get it. And school kind of helps her feel comfortable. Here's something that is very near and dear to my heart. This is my oldest daughter, whose Girl Scout Gold Award is a support group for siblings of type 1 diabetics. She felt that she was not getting the support that she wanted, so she created a support group. So she is inviting all of your non-type 1 children to her Instagram or Facebook page, and where they can rant and rave and talk and get support and everything like that. So we would love to see you out there and help her complete her Gold Award. And with that, Miss Mallory, it is all you.
Hello. Can you all hear me and see me okay? All right. So I'm coming at this from a little bit different perspective. I actually was in the nutrition field and working with type 1s before I had a child with type 1 diabetes. So I used to work with newly diagnosed families, and I had an older sister who had type 1 growing up. So I thought that I was really going to be a great help for these families, which I hope that in some aspect I was. However, it was much different bringing it home with me. I thought that I knew a lot more about type 1 diabetes than I did. And boy, I had a completely different outlook once I was acting as the pancreas. So I really do feel like it's my obligation to share with you what I know, not only as a person in the nutrition field, but also as a type 1 mom who deals with everything that we deal with our type 1 children. So I'm not sure if I'm able to advance these slides. Julia, are you able to advance the slide for me?
Yeah, since Julia is the one sharing, she has to advance.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to talk about carbohydrate counting tips to make good nutrition a little bit easier for us. And if you want to advance, thank you. So let's start off by talking a little bit about balance. And this is a no judgment zone. We all do what we need to do sometimes to make life work. However, we do need to consider how our routine choices can affect our children in the long term. So not only their nutrition now, but their nutrition later in life and how that's going to impact them. We're not only developing good health, but we're also developing habits. So let's use our parenting power to establish the good habits, because eventually we're not going to be able to make some of those choices for them. So let's start off by talking about breakfast. Is it really the most important meal of the day? I do think that it is. I know that it's very common to have blood sugar spikes in the morning. So a way that we can combat that is by having quality fat and protein. Honestly, it could be any fat or protein, but again, we want to choose some healthier options. So Fairlife milk is a very good option. It has half the amount of carbohydrates and it's higher in protein. So just by substituting regular white milk with a Fairlife milk is something that you can do to cut down on carbohydrates and kind of slow the digestion. Greek yogurt has more protein in it, and your kiddo might not be a fan of that tart taste of the Greek yogurt, but you can use it in making other things. I'll share a smoothie recipe in a little bit with you. Avocados, eggs, nut butters, those are all great choices for breakfast. And then fiber. Fiber can also help slow the digestion down. So choosing fruit like berries in particular tend to be lower in carbohydrates and high in fiber. So they're a great choice in the morning. Choosing whole grains, so whether it be any kind of bread choice, bagels, waffles, English muffins, choosing a whole grain, it's going to have more fiber and actually more nutrients overall. So it's really going to help slow down the digestion and help prevent that spike from happening. I know for some people, cereal is a complete taboo. For us, we have breakfast cereals and we have snack cereals. So our kids know that they don't ask for the snack cereals in the morning. The breakfast cereal has to be something with a little bit more substance. Not that they don't get the sugary treats once in a while, but they're treats. So we'll do something with a little less sugar and a little bit more fiber for breakfast meals. For those of you that are pumping, it might be worth discussing with your endo the option to increase your basal rate in the morning, which I'm sure is something you're already doing. I'm sorry, not your basal, your insulin to carb ratio, and getting a nice big bolus for your breakfast meal in the morning. And then what we do is we have our basal rate turned down as low as we can for about 4 hours after breakfast. So this allows us to get the insulin all at one time to prevent that spike. And then we're getting just very, very little basal rate after that. And the larger the bolus that you have, the longer that insulin is going to act in your system. So by really turning down that basal, it prevented us from having that huge dip in blood sugar just before lunchtime. So something to consider asking your doctor about. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we jumped ahead. So this is our very popular breakfast smoothie at home. We probably do this about twice a week. You can see the carbs are laid out there. This is about the amounts that we use, and it tends to be about 1.5 grams of carbohydrates per ounce of smoothie. And I'll talk to you about how to figure out the carbs in some mixed meals or prepared things like this in a little bit. But of course, it's going to depend on how much water you use to adjust for the consistency. So an 8-ounce cup of the smoothie is only about 12 grams of carbohydrates. Oh, I missed the most important ingredient. We actually pack a ton of spinach in this smoothie too, and the kids don't even know that it's in there. It doesn't change the texture or the taste. For some reason, it actually makes it a little creamier. And it seems like my husband and I joke all the time, we can pack as much spinach in there as we want, and it doesn't change the way it tastes, and the kids never complain about it. So it's a good addition. And then we also have a chocolate oatmeal that is a favorite at our house. We use half unsweetened almond milk, again, just to cut back on the carbohydrates a little bit. We use cocoa powder and Splenda. We don't use a lot of artificial sweeteners at home. We'll touch on that in a little bit. This is an area I do choose to use it, especially with it being a breakfast food for us. We add some flaxseed and some chia seeds just for some extra fiber and some nutrients in there. And we use steel cut oats because they are more slowly digested. They're less processed. So again, it's a great way to slow down the digestion. This happens to be about 7 grams of carbs per 100 grams of weight. So if you were using a food scale, weighing out 100 grams, 7 grams of carbohydrates before you were to put any peanut butter or banana on top, which is delicious. Next, please. So these are some of our common go-to lunches when Braden was in school, that is. A few things that I want to point out about our lunch meals. We've noticed that a few things he really digested slowly, whole wheat noodles in particular. So if we had some kind of pasta dish in his thermos, I knew that I had to pair it with something that was much more quickly digested. So I would put a banana or some grapes in there just to balance that out. If I didn't do that, I would notice he would dip down pretty quickly after lunch. We'd have to treat a low, and then 2 to 3 hours later, it'd be a little higher than in range because the noodles were just digesting and catching up then. So it can be helpful to try to balance some of those things out. Cold lunch is our go-to. It was a little complicated for us to do a hot lunch. I know everybody's situation is different, so whatever works for you. You know, everybody finds their own routine. Our guy, you know, he has a very healthy appetite, so hot lunch would have been just a little bit complicated for us. If you want to advance the slide, Thank you. This is the template that we use for our cold lunches. So we would put down, the types of foods and how many carbohydrates were in them. And our routine was for the teacher to give the bolus just before he would head off to the lunchroom. We're pretty blessed that Braden does have a healthy appetite, like I said, and we never really had to worry about him not eating everything that we packed. But he's old enough now, he's 6, to where if he did not finish everything, and I sort of know, appropriate amounts for him, he would go let somebody know that he did not finish all of it, and we could act appropriately. And then there's also a spot for a snack if your child happens to have an AM or a PM snack. So some things to consider about carbohydrate counting. The smaller your child, the more sensitive they're going to be to each gram of carbohydrate and to the insulin that they're receiving. Braden was diagnosed at 23 months. We used to be able to treat a low blood sugar with 1 fruit snack. I mean, not always, but for the most part, we could treat a low with a fruit snack. I think that our provider couldn't really understand at that time, and I guess I'm coming now from my perspective as a provider before I had a child. It's kind of beat into our brain that we treat with 15 grams of carbohydrates. We simply didn't need 15 grams of carbohydrates for our small child. So, your child best, how they're going to respond, and just know that it does get easier as they get older and they get less sensitive to each gram of carbohydrate, a little less sensitive to each, partial unit of insulin. So that does get to be a little easier. The accuracy of your insulin dose depends on the accuracy of your carb counting. So when they're that little, if you're off by 5 grams of carbohydrate, it's more significant than if you're off by 5 grams once your child's larger and has a bigger ratio going on. So just keep that in mind before you make any changes. So we're going to talk about fiber a little bit, and some of these nutrition topics are a bit advanced. So if you are in that group that was diagnosed less than 6 months ago, please don't get overwhelmed by this. This is not something you have to do or take into consideration now. This will be here for when you're ready for it and when you're ready to take on something else. So this can be very overwhelming. So please, this is kind of for advanced, like if you have been doing this a while and you're ready to get the extra information. And like Julia said, our contact information is at the end of the slideshow. Please take it down. And if you have questions about these things afterwards, reach out. I'm happy to help. Even if it's 6 months from now and you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to understand fiber, I'm ready to talk about fat and protein, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So the rule of thumb with fiber is that if it has at least 5 grams of at least 5 grams of fiber per serving on the box, you can subtract half of that fiber from your total carbohydrate amount. So for this example, you can divide 6 by 2. So you can subtract 3 grams from the total carbohydrate amount, and it's actually 28 grams of carbohydrate per serving that you can bolus for. So again, fiber is a great way to slow the digestion down in the morning. Fat and protein. So honestly, even as a dietitian, this is not something that I did in the beginning. I found this piece in particular just to be a little bit overwhelming to me. It is something that we do now, and it does make a difference. We've been able to prevent some low blood sugars from doing this and some highs later from higher fat meals. So what we want to know here is that fat and protein do affect blood sugar if they're eaten in large amounts. So we are calling it a fat protein unit for every 100 calories in either fat or in protein. And you would treat that the same as 10 grams of carbohydrates. However, we do not digest them as quickly as carbohydrates. So you would not want to get all of that insulin at one time. This is where it's difficult if you are doing injections, because of course we don't want to take more injections than we need to. So this might not be an option to break this down. If you have a pump though, and you can control your boluses that way, this is a great way to play around with the extend feature. That's what it's called on Omnipod. I think it's called something else if you're using a different pump system, but basically it's where you give a percentage of the insulin now and the rest of the insulin over an extended period of time. So if you are eating pizza for dinner, for instance, and it tends to be dinner where we start to see this fat and protein really start affecting blood sugar, because we're more likely to eat a high fat, high protein dinner than we are breakfast or lunch.
Mallory,
Yes.
just 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm giving you about a 4-minute warning, and because we do have questions that I want to ask you also. So
Okay.
just letting you know.
All right. Thank you. So starting out with this, if you're just trying it out, if you are guessing that your piece of pizza has 20 grams of fat in it, that would be 2 fat protein units. And you could start off by giving 50% of your bolus now and the other 50% over 4 hours and seeing how that works. And that can really help with that. They call it the dusk phenomenon. And it's really not a phenomenon as much as we think that it is probably the fat and the protein in our dinner meals. And that can really help prevent the after dinner low and the high that happens later in the evening, probably after your kiddo's in bed. And last but not least, we'll talk about sugar alcohols. Like I said earlier, we don't really do a lot of sugar alcohols at home. I'd rather give Braden real sugar and know how he's going to react to it. Plus, he thinks that it tastes better, which I can't really argue with him. Everybody reacts a little bit differently to sugar alcohols. And it might depend on the type of sugar alcohol used also. And depending on the product, it might have multiple sugar alcohols that it's using. So if you do want to play around with sugar-free items, the rule of thumb is much like fiber, where you are going to subtract the total carbohydrate amount by half of the sugar alcohols that are in there. And there's a good example for you. So in this example, you'd be able to subtract 9 grams of carbs from the total carb amount. This sugar-free candy bar would instead be 20 grams of carbohydrates that you would bolus for. Often with sugar alcohols, it can create some bloating, diarrhea, kind of some unpleasant side effects. So just be aware of that too. This is the Calorie King book that Julia had mentioned earlier. This is a great go-to for looking up carbohydrate amounts. We use a food scale for almost everything at home. We only use measuring cups for certain things now. Please don't be intimidated by a food scale. If you want to advance the slide here, I'll kind of take you through this quickly. Don't feel like the food label has to dictate the amount that your kid's going to eat or that you're going to eat. You're in control. You can choose the amount that you want to eat, and you don't have to necessarily go by that serving size on the box. If you want to know how to figure out the carbs by using a food scale, again, you want to put the dish on the scale first, then turn it on so you're not weighing the dish. Put the amount that you want to eat in the dish. You can't really see it here. It's very small. There's 53 grams of weight. That's what this means. That is weight on the label that I have circled there. So 53 grams of weight on your food scale here. I'm pointing, but I just realizing you probably can't see my cursor, has 28 grams of carbohydrates. Again, this is that same label. We're subtracting for fiber. If you decided instead you want to have 39 grams of weight in cereal to figure out the carbs in that, you can set up cross multiplying. So this is kind of old school. I know I'm running out of time here. I'll finish up. I just have one slide left. So you would put your weight that you have in your dish right next to the weight that's on the label. And then X is what we don't know. We don't know how many carbs are in that amount of weight. We know that 53 grams of weight is 28 grams of carbohydrates. And then you cross multiply like I have below. 39 times 28, and then you can divide it by 53. I still write it out sometimes because I will confuse myself with this still. But by doing this, we can tell that there's 21 grams of carbs in 39 grams of weight of cereal. If that's confusing to you, you want more help, please reach out. Like I said, I'm happy to practice that with you. And this is the last slide that I have. I believe I might have developed this when I was in the hospital having a baby, and Braden was in the care of somebody else. And I was gently encouraging some fruit while I was in the hospital, so we weren't having too many processed foods, because they're easier, right? Processed foods are a lot easier to carb count sometimes. So I laid this out to help make carb counting for some fruits, which these happen to be his favorites at the time, a little bit more easy for our caregiver to measure out.
All right, and so if Julia wants to join us also, I will ask you all a few questions. Mallory, what cereal do you recommend for breakfast, the actual brand?
So that one in particular happened to be a Kashi cereal. Kashi cereals do tend to be very high in fiber, and that one is the peanut butter variety. So it does tend to have some fat and protein in there too. It digests very slowly. I never see a spike with that cereal, but there's probably a dozen different varieties of Kashi cereal, and they're all pretty high in fiber. Fiber one is a good one, but it's not naturally occurring fiber, so it can cause a little gas and bloating. And really any non-sweetened cereal is going to be a better option than the sweetened varieties.
And then what is the total carb count for the smoothie?
So the total carb count for like the entire pitcher of smoothie?
I would think for the individual serving.
So it's 1.5 grams per ounce. So if you were to pour an 8-ounce cup of smoothie, that would be about 12 grams of carbohydrates for an 8-ounce glass. But again, you know, you're probably adding a little bit of water to thin that out, because it's a pretty thick one with all that frozen fruit.
And then what do you recommend for teens who will not eat breakfast, but are willing to grab something quick on their way out the door?
So again, it's going to really depend on their food preferences. Boiled eggs are very common, it seems like, with, you know, somebody looking for something quick to grab on the go. You know, for a protein source anyway. Like I said, as far as any type of bread product, choosing a whole grain, if it's a mini bagel or an English muffin, choosing the whole grain variety, and then slap some peanut butter on it. The peanut butter is a great way to stabilize the blood sugar.
What about kids with celiac? Can you give substitutions?
Yep, so there is gluten-free bread, of course. So getting one that's not wheat-based, you can do boiled eggs are still a great option for people with celiac disease, and they can still do peanut butter. So in fact, Kashi has a very delicious gluten-free freezer waffle available too.
They're asking if they can get the copy of the slides and the recipes. So for one thing, we are recording this right now, and we are going to make the recording available probably early next week. I've got to learn how to get it up yet. This is our first time using this, so, but we will be putting it on our website. Mallory or Julia, if you want to share some of your slides with information, if you do, I can send it in the follow-up email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And so one of our moms is the mom of a teenager, and she wants to know if you guys have any suggestions for compliance. He's generally great, but she's still reminding him to dose for food.
In our house, I have a 13-year-old, and in our house, we very much, it's a number, we fix it. We try very hard not to push her about it. We set up Dexcom alarms in our house by stages and stagger who's going to answer and when, so that we're not constantly on top of her about her high alarms or her low alarms. I answer first, and then an hour later, my husband, and then 3-alarm grandpa comes in later. And if there are 3 alarms, he tries to get in there. So we have found that she's more compliant if I can give her a little bit more room to try to fix it herself. So that's what's worked in our house so far.
Great, thank you. And what do you think of carbonara noodles?
I'm not familiar with those. I'm assuming it's I'll have to look it up. I'm assuming it's a really low carbohydrate noodle.
Never heard of it.
Carbonara.
Never heard of them.
It looks a little expensive. So personally, you know, I don't,
Are you
if that
there?
works for you and you like the taste of the noodles, you know, it does look like it's pretty darn pricey. We have really good luck with just whole wheat pasta, as far as it being very carb stable or blood sugar stable. In fact, I mentioned our son kind of goes low after he has the whole wheat noodles. We have to balance it out with something a little quicker digested. You know, just remember that our goal isn't necessary to have our, well, if you're the type 1 or your child's the type 1, it's not necessarily a low carbohydrate diet. I'm opening up a can here because I guess if you're doing injections, it might work better for you to follow a lower carbohydrate diet, which is fine. But I guess it's going to be your personal preference on that specific noodle type.
And I'm going to ask one more question. What are your thoughts on exercise and carb counting food intake before and after?
So generally what we find to work best is to not bolus for the entire amount of carbohydrate ingested. So if the activity is going to be within 30 minutes of the meal, you know, taking that into account and not bolusing for the entire meal. So whatever, it depends on the activity. So if it's going to be 30 minutes of activity, it depends on the size of the person, but maybe subtracting like 15 grams of carbohydrates from the meal to account for the exercise that you're going to be doing.
Great. Well, ladies, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your mom advice. I'm sure it has been a great help to our attendees. We appreciate your support of JDRF and your support of being here tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so before we bring on Stacy, I just want to go over a few things because I'm sure some new people have joined us since we started. So give me 1 second here. I gotta share my screen. There we go. Okay, so some basic housekeeping. As you all have noticed, I am muted and your audio is off, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. We certainly want to engage with you. You have a chat box. If you hover along the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat box that you can select, and you can chat in tips and tricks in there. You can chat in various comments. You will see Jillian putting many different links in there of the things that we talk about today and some other important things, some great resources. And then if you want to ask questions of Stacy specifically, you need to use the Q&A box. She will most likely not see your questions and I won't see them to ask her if you put them in the chat box. So you do want to put them in the Q&A. I've also noticed some of you have been putting some great tips and comments out there, but when you select who to send it to, you've been selecting all panelists. You want to hit the down arrow there where it says who it's going to and change it to all panelists and attendees. And that way everybody gets the benefit of what you're saying. We want you to be social with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you're social, and use our hashtags, Type 1 Nation, Stronger Together, and JDRF. Take a picture of your screen when I'm not on it. Share it on social media, like when Stacy's talking and so forth. Share it with everyone. Share your experience. And then also we're streaming live right now on YouTube, and Jillian's going to put the link in the chat box for you to share on social media. Anybody can jump on. They don't have to have registered at all, and they can watch us live on YouTube. Come on. All right. We need you to lend us your voice. You know, there are times when we are lobbying for different things. Like I remember, I think it was United Healthcare that set a very specific monitor that you could use, and they took away your choice of which type of treatment. And so we went and lobbied for that, and we asked our advocates to reach out to their representatives. And there are many things when it comes to funding and other areas. We send a note out to our advocates. We send an email, we send a text, and we make it very simple. We give you the words you need to use, but we do need your voice. So please share it with us. You can do it by, hang on, I'm just, wait 1 second, going way the wrong way. Visit jdrf.org/join. And again, Jillian's going to put that in the box for you, in the chat box. And of course, now it doesn't want to go forward. So, you know, with where we're at right now, we can't be in person, and that's pretty sad. But we've picked up this virtual game pretty good, and we can't have a year without our gala in both Grand Rapids and here in the Detroit area. So both of them have joined forces, and we're going to have one great virtual gala on June 4th. And there's going to be an exciting silent auction where you can bid online for various items. There's going to be a live auction. There's going to be special guests, lots of good information, lots of fun. All coming to you live online. More details will be coming out about it. And we want to thank our presenting sponsor, Ford Motor Company, because Ford is not just the presenting sponsor of our galas. They are a partner throughout the year for over 20 years. In fact, no corporate partner has done more to fund JDRF research than our very own Ford. Over $70 million to date. I want to share a thank you message that Aaron, our president and CEO, recently sent out to all Ford employees.
How do we even begin to say thank you? Your support at Ford is making it so much better for me, Edsel Ford's son, and the more than 1.6 million people with type 1 diabetes to live every day, and to advance research that will cure this disease. There's no way to express the depth of our thanks. Please know how much of an impact each of you is having, and know that together we will cure T1D.
It's time to register for WALK. Our 5 walks are coming up this fall, and we're all crossing our fingers that we're going to be together in person in each of the 5 locations. You will notice that East Lansing is much later this year. It's going to be in late October, which will make for a beautiful fall walk. We thought August was a little risky to try to do a walk then, and we wanted to give it as much of a chance as happening as possible. So we moved it down into October. But it's time to go to walk.jdrf.org and get signed up. I know Jillian, Crystal, Sarah, April, and myself all want you to get on and register. We'd love to see you this year. So this is National Volunteer Week, and we want to say thank you to all of our volunteers this week, every day. There are thousands of you that help us out, not only at our walks, but our galas. They come into the office and help us in so many different ways. We have our outreach volunteers that help us with our newly diagnosed families. So many. We have our youth ambassadors, and this week and every week, we want to send you a sincere thank you. So all of you are key to our fundraising efforts. But with many of JDRF's spring fundraising events canceled or postponed, the funding of future research is in jeopardy. In order to meet this challenge, we are asking you, our supporters who are able to, contribute to our Fund a Cure program. Fund a Cure provides JDRF with the dollars needed to move therapies and technologies out of the lab and into the waiting hands of the T1D community. 100% of your Fund a Cure donation goes directly to our mission and is 100% tax deductible. Although these are uncertain times when so many things seem beyond our control, there is one thing we can control and take great pride in, and that is in ensuring JDRF's mission to cure type 1 diabetes continues. Our youth ambassador, Kendall, who can say it much better than me, would like to tell you how your donations have helped her live a healthier and more robust life. And at the same time, Jillian's going to be putting up the link to where you can donate very easily in our chat box.
Hi, my name is Kendall Chamberlain and I have T1D. Thanks to donations to JDRF from people like you, I am able to be more independent. I participate in many school activities. I also perform in dance and theater. Since I was diagnosed at 7, my treatment has gotten easier to manage. I now use a CGM to monitor my sugar and an insulin pump that delivers insulin throughout the day. Your continued support means that our lives will only get easier. Thank you for all your support.
All right. So now we're getting ready for Stacy Sims, but before we do, she wanted me to poll you on a couple of questions. So I'm going to do that first. I'm going to bring our polls up. Okay. First of all, if you're a parent, guardian, caregiver, grandparent, how recently was your child diagnosed? And Stacy, pay attention because they're coming up to you now. And Stacy, if you want, you can unmute and open your video now also. All right, I'm going to leave it up for 5 more seconds and then I'm going to bring up another poll.
Hey, can you hear me okay? We're good?
I can hear you great. I'm going to share these results and then I'm going to bring up another poll. So it looks like longer than 3 years is the biggest amount that's there. And then I'm going to bring up a different poll. Hang on, guys. That's not the poll I want to bring up. Nope, and that. Do you feel your child's A1C is a judgment or report card on your parenting? Interesting results. I'm going to give it 5 more seconds for you to pop in your result. We're coming up to almost pretty close to half and half. Wow, 43% and 57%. All right. Then I'm going to ask you, what kind of connection do you have to T1D? To your child, grandchild, sibling, self, healthcare worker, guardian, other family member? Who do we have in the audience? And just as you would expect, it looks like it's a lot of parents, which I would expect to listen to you. Thank you. I'm going to share the results. And it looks like our 66% is a child. So now, Stacy Sims, she is giving her talk on the world's worst diabetes mom. Stacy is the host of Diabetes Connections, a weekly podcast, and the author of The World's Worst Diabetes Mom. Her son was diagnosed with type 1 in 2006, just before he turned 2. He's now 15. Stacy is here to talk about getting the confidence to make mistakes when it comes to raising children to thrive with diabetes. While Stacy is talking, Jillian is going to share a link to Stacy's website in the chat box in case you want to find out more about Stacy after her talk. And now I'm going to turn off my video and audio, and I'm going to leave it to you, Stacy. Take it on.
Tammy, thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be here. I am so nervous about pressing the share screen button and getting this correctly. If we can get through this together, we're just going to be fine. I'm just worried about that. So stay with me for a second before I jump right in. In fact, let me do that, and then I'll go through and introduce myself and all that.
Yeah,
good
you
stuff.
can do it, Stace. I know.
Oh my God, there it is. Do you see it?
I'm pretty proud of you because it took me a lot. I'm on my 3rd day and I'm finally good at it. So
I love it. Now, here's my only question is I don't see myself at all. So to get back to myself, if I want to pop into it.
Full screen. So press escape, I believe, by pressing escape.
Okay. No. Give me 1 second. If not, I'll just go back and forth a little bit. Sorry, I know this is one of those painful things that, oh, there it was. Okay. There I am.
All about being live.
I'm there. Okay, thanks for your patience. So I am the world's worst diabetes mom, and I want to convince you all tonight that you should be too. Even those of you who said you're not a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes, you yourself have type 1, or even you healthcare people. I saw you caregivers out there that may not have a family member with type 1. We could all choose, and frankly, we could all stand to be a little bit more worst. So what do I mean by that? Right? Let me go through my story just a little bit. My son, Benny here, was diagnosed right before he turned 2. I think this is about a month before his diagnosis. The picture on the left, we were baking like you do. I don't know how we got up on the table, but it was one of those cute moments that I didn't think too much about. And I said, oh, that's so sweet. I'm just going to take a picture of him and then disinfect the cutting board in the table. And then a few weeks later, Thanksgiving weekend, my whole family was in town. This is my brother-in-law, David, who hates this picture because of the guilt he feels of letting my son have that giant glass of orange juice. But we didn't know. All we knew was that Benny was really thirsty. So of course, he didn't feel very well for the rest of that day. But these are 2 pictures of our life before. So this is life shortly thereafter. A couple of months after diagnosis, Benny was diagnosed in December of 2006. This is April of 2007. We went to the JDRF walk in our area. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is at Carowinds. It's a big amusement park in our area. And of course, Benny is on my husband's shoulders. That's my daughter, Leah, at the bottom. She was 5 years old at this time. And I have the gigantic backpack. Because, especially in the beginning, I think you take everything, you'd put your house on your back if you could when it comes to diabetes supplies. We were really just thinking we were at the end of the diaper bag, right? I was thinking, all right, we're almost there. He's 2. My daughter had potty trained at 2. We were so close to no diaper bag. And then, of course, I schlepped my house around with me for a few years after that. In addition to being a diabetes mom, I am also a broadcaster. I spent many years in television and radio, local television and radio news. And this is a fun interview I got to do for my blog years ago. I started a blog called Off the Dial. And this interview was a bunch of kids who raised a lot of money for JDRF. They're one of the largest fundraisers in the country at St. Mark's School near Charlotte. And one of the reasons why is because there's a family with 3 children, or they're not there anymore, they've grown up, who have type 1, and this is one of the kids. And I started Diabetes Connections, which is a weekly podcast all about type 1 diabetes. So that's, in a quick way of speaking, who I am and what I'm all about. All right, so when I say the world's worst diabetes mom, let's talk about that, because I want to kind of share some parameters with you, right? What the heck am I talking about? My son was diagnosed 13 years ago. How could I be the worst if he's doing okay? And he really is doing okay. This talk is not going to include a lot of numbers. That is not how I roll. If you listen to the podcast, you already know that. But just to give you a glimpse, when I say the worst, I don't mean ignoring diabetes. I don't mean not taking it seriously. We are a family that has had to manage this for a very long time. And my son is healthy and happy, independent, confident, resilient, a giant pain in the butt half the time, but a good kid and really doing well. So I'll show you these pictures kind of in reverse order. The bottom right circle, that's a diabetes camp last summer. He's been going there since he was itty bitty. On the left is my kids in a redwood tree. That was a huge trip we took last summer. It was a real, one of those lifetime trips. I could not wait to go to the redwood forest. It had been a dream of mine since I was a kid. And that's Benny on the upper circle as Rufus, because like a lot of kids, he was a superstar with JDRF when he was younger and then kind of wanted less to do with it as he got older. And finding a way back as Rufus has been really cool. He can get dressed up and be silly. But I show you all this to say, being the world's worst diabetes mom isn't about, not treating lows or ignoring highs. It's not about not measuring. There was so much great information in that last session. It's not about that. It's about having the confidence to make mistakes. And it's about embracing those mistakes because we learn from them, right? I mean, everybody hears you fall down and then you get back up stronger than ever before. But I find that so many people are so frightened to fall down with diabetes that you never get to the get up stronger part. So that's what I want to help you out with today. All right, let's talk about family. When I searched for family on my little software program that I use, I get a lot of access to a lot of photos. I got all these pictures, right? This is the first kind of stuff that come up when you search for family with no other adjectives. Now, I don't know about you, but this is a lovely set of photos, but nobody here is throwing up on anybody else. Nobody is yelling. Nobody is crying. There's no dirt. Those people are wearing a lot of white. This is not how my family rolls. And I think sometimes when we start thinking about how our family should look and the perfection that we should see, if we're only able to find the perfect basal rate, the perfect activity, the perfect food, the best cereal, right? We just asked about that. I think sometimes we set ourselves up because we're looking for that perfection. Look, regular parenting is tough enough, but diabetes parenting has all these other layers to it. I've just touched on a few, but it's not just about the tasks we have to do because there's so much to that. I know that most of you from that poll are in this for 3 years or more, but there's a lot of new people out there. And, you think back to those days, how much time did it add to your day to count carbs, stop what you're doing, check blood sugar, give shots, comfort your child in ways you never had to before, take some time for yourself to cry in the shower or whatever you need to do. It's an awful lot that we ask of diabetes parents. And then we put something else on our plate. We put a lot of guilt. And part of that is because we get a grade. Now, I know half of you said you don't look at your child's A1C or your own as a report card or as a judgment on your parenting. I was thrilled to see that number. Maybe next time I'll ask, have you ever thought of it that way? Because I would have checked, no, I don't think about it that way at all right now, but I did once upon a time. And it's hard not to, because we get that number every 3 months. Right? You're waiting, you're thinking, especially for those of us, and I'll say us diagnosed, even though obviously my child has type 1 and I do not, but for those of us diagnosed before CGM, and I don't mean before Share or before it was widely used or before the G6, I mean before CGM, the only way you'd really know what was up, you could look in your meter and get an average, but was that A1C. So you'd wait every 3 months. Well, it kind of felt like that sometimes, right? I love her face. She's like, dude, give me a break. But he's very stern. This is your report card. This is how it used to make me feel, very judgy stuff. Because, if we can measure it, a lot of people say, well, if you measure it, you can fix it, you can improve on it. Yes, that's true. You have to have the numbers. You have to be able to measure. But I think as human beings, if we can measure it, we can also judge ourselves for it and we can compete on it. We'll get to that in a little while. Well, now in addition to that good old A1C, we have CGM, which is great. And I love, huge fan. And Dexcom sponsors my podcast. So I should say that. I probably shouldn't have put the 47, then I should have given them a good number or an in-range number. All right, but we have all of this information now, and I'm going to scroll through this because this is what it feels like, right? Boom, boom, boom. You're attacked every 5 minutes with information. Would I rather have it this way? You bet your bippy. My son got a CGM. He got the Dexcom when he was 9 years old. It's a wonderful piece of equipment. I know it's going to be standard of care. Yes, there are cost and access issues. Absolutely. But CGM is here. We're not going back, and I wouldn't want to. But I think it's also difficult to take this judgment that we're getting every 5 minutes, or let me put it this way. It's difficult to take this number we're getting every 5 minutes and not attach emotion to it, right? And that is really, really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to parenting a child with type 1 diabetes. That's just one emotional aspect of it. It kind of makes me feel that we can never do enough. So let me tell you a little bit about how when things go wrong, it can really be okay, right? Let me take you from this, where we all start out, right? You're sitting there talking to your endocrinologist, trying to figure out what language is this person speaking. I mean, I don't know about you. I'd never given a shot. My children are yelling and my dog is in here. Apparently my dog has opened the door. Excuse me. Can someone come get the dog, please? Yes, thank you. Oh, I love it. So that was my dog Freckles making a surprise appearance, although we didn't see her. And that was my daughter Leah helping me out as usual. But I don't know about you, when I was in the doctor's office and they were saying these things like bolus and basal and A1C and CGM, I was like, oh my God, I have no idea. So how do we get from there to here? Right? It's not easy, but it really can be done. And I want to walk you through a few steps that helped me out. And then I'm going to share some of my big mistakes, because remember, this is about having the confidence to make those mistakes. I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but you need the confidence. Whoops, I'm sliding all over the place. You need the confidence to let yourself fail, right? You need to know it's going to be okay. And when I say fail, when I say mistakes, I'm talking about let your child go on that sleepover, right? Blood sugar might be sky high that night. Let your child play that sport. Blood sugar might be really low. And a lot of you are thinking, well, yeah, sure, I do that already. Well, a lot of parents right now are terrified to do those simple things. And it's our job as parents that have been there to kind of help them through it. All right, so what do we do? First, acknowledge and articulate your fears. And do this to your health team. Don't do this on social media. Social media is wonderful for so many things. Support, conversation. Hey, me too. Just that feeling of I've been there. You know what social media is terrible about? Facts. Factual information. It's just not great at spreading that at the rate that it spreads the not so factual information. So I've always been told, and we were diagnosed before social media was a thing. Benny was diagnosed before the iPhone. So we didn't have a Facebook group to jump into and ask questions of. We only had real people and our healthcare team. And I think it really changes the equation. And when I say acknowledge and articulate your fear, I'm talking about the big fears. And I don't go into too much detail here because frankly, I don't know if who's watching. I don't know if there are kids. Sometimes when I know who's in the room, we can really talk about this. But I'm talking about the big, bad fears that most parents with diabetes have about their children. The fears of the things you don't come back from. And I sat down with my endocrinologist without my son in the room. This is not a question. There are some that I think is fine with the kids around. There are some questions you may have that you don't want your children to be there for. And I said, lay it out for me. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that the real science did not reflect my fear. So how do you get to your endocrinologist, right? How do you get some time alone? It can be very difficult. I'm very lucky that my endo will spend some time on the phone with me. My son is old enough that I can kick him out if I want to, although last time he kicked me out, which is a whole other story. But try to do that. And I always show this slide, it cracks me up, because once we articulate our fears, they go away. I mean, they don't really go away, but they become a lot lessened. and this is Voldemort. If you're not familiar with this in the Harry Potter series, maybe I should explain. Nobody ever wanted to say his name, right? It was too scary. But once they said its name, it was so much less scary. And I saw the Mr. Rogers movie, the Tom Hanks Mr. Rogers movie, just 2 weeks ago. I finally saw it. And I yelled in the middle of the movie because he says that it's a real Mr. Rogers quote. If it can be mentioned, it can be managed. That is a revelation when it comes to diabetes, because nobody wants to talk about the big, scary stuff. And we can talk about it more in the chat. I can't see the chat right now. So I'm going to do this at the end, but we can talk more specifically, but I think you all get what I'm talking about.
Hey, Stacy.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to come on towards the end and I will help moderate the questions and give you.
Oh, great. Yes. Thank you.
So don't even worry about it.
Okay. Phew. Okay. But I am going to say, I'm hesitating on this question because I feel like it's irresponsible for me to set it up and not really say it. So I'm going to talk about this right now. And if your children are watching with you, I think that's okay too. But look, I know that the biggest fear is that your child is going to drop dead in the middle of the night. Ask your healthcare provider about that. It is a question that has an answer. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of rumor behind it. But I was amazed. My endocrinologist, who has seen thousands and thousands of children, flat out told me, I've never lost a kid to that. There are other things. There's alcohol, there's mental health issues. There are things that happen with diabetes. But this middle of the night, if my kid gets to 60 and is going to die, that you see in Facebook groups is not true. So talk to your healthcare provider. Don't talk to me, right? These are not things that I feel comfortable that I can go through as facts because I am not a healthcare provider. I'm a layperson, but that's what I'm talking about. I'm sure you already knew that. All right, talk to your child. So talk to your child. And when I say that, I don't mean about what I just mentioned. Talk to your child about routines, about things with diabetes that, you may not think to go through that you may think are going to scare your kid, right? You get that question a lot when they're tiny. They just do what you want them to do. And then they're 6 or 7 and they're thinking, well, what happens if I don't do this? Or what happens if I try that? Or why am I doing that? And the example I like to give is fire safety. When your kid is talking about fire safety, and it's usually because they learned something at school, right? I don't know about you, but I never thought to talk to my kids about fire safety. Just don't do that. But when the schools talk to them about it, what do they say? They say, have a plan, right? If you do this, it could lead to that. If this happens, have a plan. Talk to your parents. Everybody get on the same page, and then if you need to, you call 911 because it's a real emergency, right? And they go through this and role play it. That's, to me, exactly what we should be doing with diabetes. Talk to your kids. Well, we're checking blood sugar because of this. If something goes wrong, we call the doctor. If something really happens, we can go to the hospital and they can fix it. They can lay it out for your child in a way that makes sense for them and is age appropriate. I also say, and again, this is mostly for adults, I also say with fire safety, they're not showing you the results of a burned down house. I haven't ever heard of a fire safety class for elementary school kids where they say, if you do this, here's what could happen. And they show you the charred remains. And I say that because I don't think it's so much anymore, but a couple of years ago, there was this big trend of, I'm going to bring my kid to the kidney dialysis center and show them what's going to happen. To me, that's the same thing, and I don't advise it. Listen to your child. That is a totally different thing than talking to your child, right? Your child has things to say to you. A good example of this is my son, several years ago, gosh, he was probably about 6 years old or maybe 8. We could not get his blood sugar down. I mean from 300. For 2 days, he'd go 300, he'd come a little bit down, then he'd go back up. It was unbelievable. And we weren't sure what to do. We were changing insets, we were giving injections, we were trying things. And after the second day, he said to me, well, what happens if it never comes down? And I thought, wow, that hadn't occurred to me. In my head, I thought, we're going to be fine. I mean, this is not great. He didn't have ketones. He wasn't dehydrated. I was in touch with my endo's office. It didn't occur to me that he could even think that. And so we sat down and talked about it. And we talked about calling our doctor. There was nothing we hadn't handled in the 6 years that he'd been dealing with diabetes to that point or whatever it was. And that was a satisfying answer for him. He knew people were looking out for him. P.S. It turned out we'd left the insulin in the car in the summer. It was the one and only time that happened. We were using skunky insulin. We changed it out. Everything was fine. And then I stole this last one from my dear friend Maura McCarthy, who is a wonderful author and speaker and writer. Decide to say yes. The idea here is that if you would say yes without diabetes, you have to find a way to say yes with diabetes. And I think a lot of this really just comes down to parenting. As diabetes parents, we do not all parent the same way. Forget diabetes, right? A lot of people will never let their child go on a sleepover because they don't do sleepovers. It has nothing to do with diabetes. Or they'll let their kid go on a sleepover at 4, like my neighbor did. That's not how we do it in my family, right? Or you have to be 12 before you can go on a sleepover, or whatever the family rule is. But if you said yes without diabetes, you have to find a way to say yes with diabetes, in my opinion. So I think that's a great rule, and it's really helped me. And then the last one is find ways to connect. Connecting with other parents, just like you're doing right now, even connecting with adults with type 1, which is incredibly valuable, even if it's just reading their blogs or having a quick conversation with them. You adults, as you're listening or watching right now, what a resource you are. Thank you so much for all that you do for us. I have to say the adults I've met in the community are so amazing and helpful to me. But just connecting will change your perspective. I mean, there's so many ways to connect. Now that we're all stuck at home and have to do this virtually, sure, it's not quite the same, right? But there are still terrific ways to do it. I mean, these are camp pictures, Friends for Life, JDRF walks. This is a group in Maine that gets together, the Maine Peapods. And I think maybe the next time I do this presentation, I'll swap out some Zoom meetups, because we've been doing a bunch of these for the podcast and my local group, my local JDRF, and it's been phenomenal. So that's how you get to a little bit more confidence, or enough confidence at least, to make some mistakes. So I'm going to read an excerpt from the book in just a second. Let me see where I am. Yeah. I had put through, and it's okay if not, I had put through that maybe we could do a poll on what to read, which excerpt. Tammy, did that go through or no?
I didn't, but I can do it in 2 seconds. So how about, while I'm doing that, I'm going to bring someone on that made a comment that I'd actually like her to say it live, because it just really got me.
Can I stop the share? Should I stop the share?
No.
Okay.
Brittany Hetrick, I'm about to make you live, so that you can say your comment to Stacy yourself. So I've just given you the ability to talk. You need to go to the lower left-hand corner, or actually I think I could, nope, you need to go to the lower left-hand corner of your screen and unmute your microphone. And then there you go. And now you can make your comment that you made to Stacy while I build the poll. Are you there?
Hey, go right ahead.
Are you there, Brittany? I show you as unmuted. You might need to turn on the sound on your computer. We'll see. Okay, I will say her comment, and I can still get this done.
Okay.
So she said, Stacy, your book arrived on my doorstep the day we were discharged from the hospital after diagnosis, sent to me by a friend. I just want to thank you for helping me get through these first few weeks. So that just really got me when I saw that.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me talk about that for a brief moment, because first, thank you to whoever bought that and sent it to you. I'll be honest with you, as much as I want people to buy this book, I cannot imagine reading it in the first couple of weeks after diagnosis. What an overwhelming time, because I share this in the book. That's when I don't know about you, Brittany, maybe you were better than me. I made every mistake you can possibly make. And I joke about this, but it's a true story. As I said, we had no Facebook, nothing like that. I called our endo's office every day for a month. Literally every day I had a question. He was very resistant to shots and finger sticks. He was terrified he'd run away all the time. And so I was always worried, did I get the insulin in? How am I measuring it? They didn't even have a half unit. We had no pen, we had syringe because we had to do quarter units. And there wasn't a half unit pen at the time. I stabbed myself. I shot insulin up my nose. I put insulin in my mouth by mistake because it was on my finger. I had all these crazy questions. I was measuring ketchup. I was measuring peas. I was doing everything I thought I needed to do. And by the end of that month, I called the endocrinologist and just said, hi, I don't have a question, but I feel like I should call you anyway. And they laughed at me. That staff was so wonderful. So I guess it's a roundabout way of saying, I'm obviously not a healthcare provider, but I'm glad I was there for you in some way in those first crazy days, because what if your child is 2 or 22? I don't think it's any easier. So,
All right, I've got the poll ready. I'm going to put it out there so you guys can answer. Which mistake do you want to hear about, when they were on the road traveling, at the beach, or my vote, one that was totally her husband's fault?
Look at that. Yeah. All right. I know what I'm reading.
And while that's coming up, I do wanted to mention there was something else. Anne mentioned that she's so thankful for your honesty, that it's refreshing, and she's terrified to let her son go away to college. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. So I'll be honest with you, and I need to preface this. I really should always start the talks by saying, just because I let my son do all these things, and I do let him do a lot, it doesn't mean I don't worry. I've lost a lot of sleep. I very much worry. I pull my hair. I play with my hair all the time. So I know that one of the questions I get a lot is like, how are you so calm? And I'm really not, but I've decided I just got to let him do it anyway. So with college, my daughter is a freshman at college. My son is a freshman in high school. But I do let my son go away every month to non-diabetes camp. And that, since he's 8, which is too young, if you ask me, but 9 or 10 would have been fine. But 8 was a little too soon to start that, to be honest with you, where he was totally responsible for all of his diabetes with just a medical staff to back him up if he had an emergency, but they wouldn't do anything for him. And he did very well after the first year, which is another story. But I equate my college experience, hopefully, to that, in that I woke up every morning for a week at least thinking he's dead. And I killed him, and I let him go to camp and do this. And I'm an idiot. I am the worst mother in the world to let him do that. But having sent my daughter to college, and my daughter goes to college in New Orleans, and we live in Charlotte, I didn't like that. I was terrified for her just to be that far away as a young woman on her own in New Orleans. Ugh. But it's working out. Of course, she's home now with everybody else. And I think the fears for my son are similar, although they're diabetes, right? I think there's so much to say about this, and I don't have experience with a college student with type 1. I would highly recommend the College Diabetes Network. They're a wonderful organization. They're doing a lot of great work with this. You can come back around and visit me in 4 years and see what I really do. I don't plan to follow Benny in college, unless he goes to college 10 minutes away. If he's 4 or 5 hours away, I don't plan to follow his CGM. I don't think that to me will help me. I don't know that it'll help him. Come revisit us. We'll see what happens. I do think there are a lot of strategies to help a child who's going away to college. I think the number one is education and communication. We're actually starting to talk about Benny right now, about drinking, about how his body will react, about responsibility, about the things he has to do that are different. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I don't think it's fair not having the personal experience, but I would recommend College Diabetes Network and asking other parents what has worked. And if, again, I said it all goes back to parenting, if that doesn't sound right to you, right? Maybe your child will never drink. Maybe you have different priorities. Maybe you want to follow. Then find the group that can help you with that and go on from there. But we all do this differently. But I will also say this on the podcast, in closing on college, I've talked to a bunch of adults with type 1 diabetes who were diagnosed as kids and grew up with it and are fine now. And almost all of them were terrible diabetics in college. They did not, we don't use this language anymore, right? They weren't compliant. They didn't take care of themselves. They partied, they drank, they ate, they slept late. They weren't responsible. And while it wasn't ideal, they're fine. So I'll leave you with that. And, but I hear you. Come back to me in a couple of years and I'm sure my tune will be a little different.
And it looks like they want to hear about what your husband did.
Right. So this book is full of all of my mistakes and what we learned from them. So I have to find my place because this chapter is actually all about us starting an insulin pump. This was one of the biggest mistakes we ever made, and it was right at the beginning. So I'll set this up by saying we decided that we would start an insulin pump. We got it 6 months after diagnosis. So my son was 2.5. And we thought that it would be a really good idea to start on the pump just before going to New York, because that is where my parents spend the summer. Here's my thinking, and now I'm reading from the book. As you start on the pump, you need to check blood sugar more than usual. For us, that meant at least every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. I thought that with my mom around, she could watch the kids during the day while I caught up on sleep. This seemed to make starting the pump on the road not such a bad idea. I hear you laughing already. Hold on. In another genius move, we timed this out for the same weekend my husband goes away every year to play golf with his best friend in Vermont. I knew that without Slade, that's my husband's name, I'd be the only one who could take care of Benny and the new pump. But I wasn't really worried. We packed everything we needed. I could handle this, and I did for about 2 days. Along with changing the pump in set every 3 days, you change out or really replace the insulin inside the pump. And I explained that. The new cartridge goes into the pump, and after a brief loading and priming process, you are good to go. It helps to bring a new cartridge. Apparently, we did not. I checked everywhere. No cartridge, no special needle. That meant no way to put more insulin into the pump. I won't tell you who packed all the diabetes supplies, but his name rhymes with played, as in played golf in Vermont while I was freaking out in New York. Honestly, even with Slade away, I knew we'd be safe. We could switch back to shots. But first, I wanted to try everything I could to keep Benny pumping. We had just started. I called everyone. Slade, of course, our endo, Animus, we were using an Animus pump at the time, and Lynette, our diabetes educator. The endo on call got back to us first and said we would need a lure lock needle in order to get insulin out of the vial and into the old cartridge. My dad was on it. Out the door in a flash. I later learned he went to every pharmacy in the area and he wound up at a hospital and they gave him the needle. I carried that stupid lure lock needle in my backup bag for years, my poor dad, but he is effective and resourceful. Our educator, Lynette, came to the rescue. I love our endo practice, but it takes another diabetes parent sometimes to really get into the nitty gritty. I had mentioned earlier in the book that our educator has 2 children with type 1. Lynette politely acknowledged the lure lock needle suggestion was a good and proper one. Then she told me not to worry about it and walked me through reusing what we had on hand, totally off the books and not at all FDA approved. Basically, we just reused the old cartridge. The pump compresses the cartridge to extract the insulin, so I stuck my fingernail in the ridge where it was pushed in itself and was able to pull it back open so that we could put more insulin through it again. No need for the special needle. We used a syringe I'd bought for backup to transfer insulin out of the vial and into the old cartridge. It took a while, and we had to wait until the air bubbles were out, but it worked. Hey, quick side note, you can do that pretty much with any pump system. Again, totally off the books, not FDA approved. Your endo and the healthcare people who are watching the webinar right now, close your eyes, close your ears. But you can do it with just about any pump. Tandem, which we use now, is different because it's got the little baggie inside, but you can reuse cartridges. Not the best, but in a pinch. So here's the wild part. The next day, Animus called my mom's house to tell her the New York rep was on her way over with the missing cartridges. How about that? That was really amazing. I really was blown away by that. Animus, of course, is no longer in business, not because of me. It wasn't my fault. Meanwhile, Slade had actually found a family in Vermont with kids on the same pump. Again, remember, this was before social media. He and his friend had spent an hour calling friends and friends of friends until they found someone with T1D who used the same cartridges. He was ready to drive them to New York. Luckily, he didn't need to. I can't say I'm happy we made that mistake, but forgetting those cartridges gave me new confidence. It was far from the last time we'd forget something or hit a snag with the pump or diabetes tech. And knowing we'd MacGyvered our way through this situation so early on gave me confidence for the next mistake. It also solidified my trust in our doctors and educators. They were there for us, even out of state and late at night. These are dedicated and special people. We were lucky to have such a great team. The rest of the trip passed without any major diabetes excitement. We swam a lot, the kids went to the zoo and read books with their grandparents. The pump behaved and supplies were plentiful. We came home rested and ready to tackle the next diabetes mistake. Knowing us, it was not far away. And I have never let my husband forget that he did not pack those darn cartridges. But that's that story.
That's a great story.
Thank you, Tammy.
That's wonderful. I also have, which one of our other presenters answered for her, which with a wonderful answer, but I want to hear your answer also. Suzanne says her 8-year-old was diagnosed at 23 months. And since she started school, she's embarrassed and doesn't want anyone to know. Any suggestions on how to help her overcome that?
Yeah, that is really tough. So the child is now 8? Is that?
I would think, well,
Did you say 8?
Yeah, she's 8 now. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's really tough. My son was diagnosed at 23 months also, but shockingly with me as a mom, he's very extroverted. My daughter is very introverted. So I have some experience with that. You know, we did a lot where starting in preschool, we would go in and read a story and we would talk about diabetes, and Benny would show his pump and he would talk to his friends. And obviously that's not something that this child is probably interested in. I don't think there's any point, and I'm not saying that the mom is trying to do this, but some advice might be, you know, go into class and she'll get over it and push it anyway. I don't really think that my approach is one that would work for this child, but I would back up and say, what else is going on, right? Do people who need to know she has diabetes know? First of all, is she safe? That's the first question you have to answer. Does the school know? Do the people closest to her at school, do the right people know? Do her best friends know? And if her best friends don't know, or she doesn't want to talk to them at all, then I would actually take it out of school and bring them to your house and have like a 4-person little pizza party or a 4-person dessert party, or, you know, however your family eats, but to show that, hey, life is pretty normal with type 1 diabetes. You know, even if you eat a different way, this is normal for my family. This is how we do it. Try this. It's delicious. You'll like this, or, you know, whatever, but have a little tea party or just have a few friends over. And that's all you need to do. Now, you can't hide diabetes because it's not safe. So I would also ask, and again, if we're having a one-to-one conversation, it'd be a little different, but I think these days there's a lot of kids who wear Dexcom to school and wear insulin pumps to school. And the beeping is frankly really embarrassing and it's disruptive to them, right? Even if it beeps twice a day, we may say, oh, that's no big deal. Come on, just wear the gear. But to the child, that's devastating. Everybody's looking at you, right? Everybody wants to stop. Are you okay? Or what was that? And so there are ways, I think, to use CGM and use pump in school that are a compromise, that keep the element of safety, but that don't result with beeping all day long. And by that, I mean, I'm going to be exaggerating here, but I think you all get it. Like, don't set your kids' high alarm to 1:30 while they're at school, right? Don't set their low alarm to 1:30 while they're at school if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum. You know, you really need to compromise in that respect. And I think part of that comes because when my child was in elementary school, he got the Dexcom when he was in 4th or 5th grade, end of 4th grade, I want to say, maybe, I don't remember. But he had the receiver, no share, no phone. So what we would do is just at the times of day when he would normally do a finger stick, he would just look at his receiver. And that worked beautifully. And so I never wanted, as he got older in school, in middle school, we never actually had alarms except for the low. Certainly, I don't think that you should turn your low alarm off. I'm not advocating that. But I do think there are, and again, I'm not knowing that this mom is talking about this. I don't think that it sounds like her daughter is embarrassed by alarms. But that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind, that they're living this life, right? And if we put ourselves in their shoes, not at our age, but at their age, it can really make a difference.
And Angie actually had a great tip. One of our audience members, she said that she ordered some fun rubber bracelets that said her name and T1D to break the ice with classmates. And then she educated friends as they came over and gave them a BFF packet printed from Beyond Type 1. I think that's great.
Yeah, those are really terrific. I just don't want anybody to think that you need to change your child's attitude in terms of a shy kid's always going to be shy. But I love that idea. And Beyond Type 1 has some beautiful packets and great stuff for kids. They really did. They do it up nicely.
And what does your son think about you talking about him? Has he ever done
it
with you?
We're very careful. It's fun. It's a good question. Everything that's in the book and everything I talk about on the podcast, I have permission to talk about. We went over this. Well, I've been trying to keep that in mind since he was younger, which is frankly why I'm kind of a crummy mom blogger, because I don't share enough. I really don't. If you look at my stuff on social media, I've always been pretty bad at it. I think part of that comes from also by the time we were in Facebook, my kids weren't babies. So we didn't grow up with that. We were laughing the other day about something I wish I had a picture of. And I was like, remember the olden days when you didn't take a picture of everything every 5 minutes with your phone? Because I do that now. I take a picture of everything. And, just 10 years ago, we didn't do that. It's crazy. But he's cool with it. When I asked both of my kids about writing the book 2 years ago, they said, well, I think it just makes you look bad, Mom. And I think that's the right attitude for them to have. But I'll be honest with you, I'm very careful. And I do a social media talk about being careful about how much information you share. And I got to tell you right now, I'll never miss an opportunity to step on my soapbox. I am 100% against sharing sick day photos of our children. I would just ask you to please think, if you're going to take a picture of your child in distress, please think before you post it. A child in the hospital, a child ill in the doctor's office, a child in DKA. We all love you. We sympathize with you. We are there for you. But your child has a right to privacy and may not want that picture to be posted for posterity, for him to find when he's 25 years old or things like that. So I'm sorry, I know that wasn't what you asked, but I will never miss an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Jackie mentioned that as a T1D that was diagnosed at 8 and who went away 8 hours to college, she turned out all right.
Yeah.
She didn't wake up her parents in the middle of the night with a shared CGM alarm. She said, we're pretty resilient and make our own mistakes too. And I think that's great.
I love to hear that. You do have to let your kids make their own mistakes too. It's so hard with or without diabetes. But yay, thank you for chiming in. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I know there was another one. I'm scrolling through these. I'm trying to. Do you have a best friend you can reach out to who gets it? This is one of the hardest things that one of the moms found early on.
I did not. You mean for me, right? A best friend for me. I did not. And my friends still don't really understand. And they are my wonderful friends. They're friends I love so much, but I don't think they'll ever understand. I don't think anybody can unless you live with it. And it's not because, oh, woe is me and it's so hard. But you can't understand. What did we know before we were in this world? You just can't get the nuances of it. You can't understand the frustrations and the victories even. So I do have some best diabetes friends now, but I had to make them after my son was diagnosed. And that's that community aspect of it. I'm really, really lucky to have people here in the Charlotte area that I can connect with. And I met years ago, my friend Ann started a thing called Diabuddies. Our kids were babies. I think her son was diagnosed at 3. And we met when they were toddlers and we're still, great friends. And I've met a lot of people online that before all this nonsense, we were able to meet up. And I do have a core group of diabetes moms, but I don't think I spent a lot of time early on trying to explain everything to my non-diabetes friends. And I just can't say I gave up because they want to be educated and they want to know, but I let go of that need to make them understand because they have challenges in their lives that I will not understand. Simple things to us, right? I mean, you want to think about other health challenges, a friend who's divorced and remarried. I mean, those are things I don't have the same kind of experience with. So once you kind of come to that place, I think it's a little bit easier to move forward.
That's a good point. And I think that's the questions we have. I have to say, I love that your dog came in.
Oh, you Gewalt.
Best part of the virtual world. Fortunately, my cat usually only howls when I have the mute on, thank goodness. But I've been, as I've been in this virtual world in a lot of meetings, there's been kids that run in and dogs and cats. And it's just wonderful. It's real life. We're all at our homes, we're all making do. And I think it adds some reality to it and some real life.
Definitely.
It warms it up.
I do have a couple of quick slides. They're very easy to scroll through. It's kind of the end. If I can do that.
We have time if you have. Yeah, we're fine.
We can keep talking. All right. So coming back from the reading, I usually will say, so here's my son. This is him, obviously, when he was diagnosed. This is him about a month after he got his pump. And that pacifier, man, I thought he was going to go to college with it. But I love that picture because this is how he wore that pump forever with that little pouch. And he doesn't wear it like that anymore. And then this is him now, 15. This is him actually, gosh, how far long ago is this already? 4 or 5 months ago, getting his permit So we have a permitted driver in our house. And I put this slide in not to embarrass him at all, just because I think it shows the difference and how much things have changed for us. And I'm so proud of the kid he is now, from this little boy who, was terrified of everything diabetes wise. And I just hope that some of the stuff we've talked about today can make it so that the next time you're feeling judged, you're feeling like you have to be perfect, pow, you can knock that thought right out, ta-dung, and be a superhero. All right, so here's my plug, Tammy. Sorry, I'll just do a quick shameless self-promotion. The World's Worst Diabetes Mom is available on Amazon or I know you're putting up the Stacey Sims website. It's there too. But when I can't scroll. I broke my scroller. There it is. And there's an Audible version. I read the book. So if you enjoyed that, you can find that on Amazon as well. But I wanted all of that to say, I'm doing a promo code for you guys. So if you want to buy the book at a discount, at checkout, use promo code WORST. It's just the world's worst. So the word WORST. If you put that in at checkout, you will save $5 off the price of the book. Now that's only on my websites. Unfortunately, Amazon doesn't let me work in a discount, but use WORST and it'll work out for you. So let me get off that page because that's very self-promoting. And we'll go here.
Well, that's okay. I'm sure that there are people that are ready to read your book. This was just such a great talk. It was entertaining. It was informative. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and just being so engaging. We truly appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for giving me an excuse to brush my hair and put some lipstick on tonight.
No kidding.
Woo-hoo!
I do it every night this week. So for the first time in weeks. So yeah, that's about it. And can I say that here in Detroit, it's snowing on April 22nd. So it's not now. It was very light, but still it was snowing and it's April 22nd. And that just really is not good.
Hey, Tammy, there is one other question that popped up in the Q&A.
Yes. Okay. Let me grab it. Hold on. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is good. Okay. I've been T1D for over 50 years, and your comments about being perfect, but home. My husband is a scientist and strives for perfection with my numbers. I get fearful of his responses and feel judged. Suggestions?
Yes. Oh, that's got to be so difficult. That's got to be really difficult. Okay. So my suggestion, and I assume that you've been married for quite some time, because if you're dating this guy, it's a different answer. But if you've been diagnosed for more than 50 years, obviously the first thing you think of that comes from a place of great concern, right? And that's what all of us parents are as well. It's like, oh my gosh, your A1C, we want to keep it at this level because you've really, your health. I would suggest, and I'm sure your scientist husband knows this, I would suggest that you both look up Dr. Bill Polanski at the Diabetes Behavioral Institute. He has done amazing things with, I guess it's the psychosocial part of it. And I'm not going to explain it very well, but he talks about how we support each other with diabetes, caregivers, spouses, parents, that kind of thing. And they do a lot of good work. And this is also, I'm not going to get too far into the information here. Sorry. But they do a lot of good work in terms of how to really live with this. Not so much the dosing and that kind of stuff, but they do a lot of empathy studies and talking and information. I also think there's a group called the Joslin Medalists, and you may already be part of that. If not, please look them up. The Joslin Medalists it's basically a study at the Joslin Center in New England. And if you've been diagnosed for 50 years or more, they want to talk to you because they're studying, we all kind of know this, but I think we don't acknowledge it. If you were diagnosed 50 years ago, it was completely different, right? They didn't have any of the tools we have now. I mean, I don't know if you guys know, but in the 80s, they didn't have home meters in the 1980s. So things have changed significantly from then. They didn't know that an A1C really made a difference. They didn't know that if you could have decent control, you could live a long and healthy life. They thought people with diabetes were doomed until this is the late 80s, early 90s with the diabetes control and complications trial. So things have changed so much. All of that to say, sorry, getting back to the question, the Joslin Medalist study is one of, well, how did these people do it? With all of what we know now, they didn't have any of that. With the rudimentary tools, how did they live so long? How are they still thriving? So it's a really valuable study. And my understanding is there's a secret Facebook group for those people. So you may find yourself with a bunch of peers if you're not already acknowledging, or if you don't already know that, and a community of people who are dealing with the same thing you are, which is, I've been diagnosed my whole life. I know what I'm doing. My spouse will not leave me alone, right? He's worried about me. I love him for that, but I know what I'm doing. Get out of my life. So you may find other people that are feeling the exact same way that you are. If you can't find that, come to my Facebook group. It's Diabetes Connections, the group. I got a bunch of people in there who've been living with diabetes for more than 50 years. They knock my socks off, and I bet they'd have good advice for you. But Dr. Bill Polanski, Diabetes Behavioral Institute, he's just a wonderful man. I calm down every time I talk to him.
Thank you so much, Stacy. It has been
pleasure.
such a pleasure to have you here. Truly a pleasure. Before we go, I'd like to remind you all that we are in a serious fundraising challenge right now, funding challenge. We need your help. We truly need your help to keep funding the research that we need to find a cure. And right now, with the situation we're in and not being able to have live events, that's gotten really hard to do. So Jillian has just posted the Fund a Cure donation link again. And I want to remind you that 100% of those donations go directly to our mission. They go right to research, and they're 100% tax deductible. So please donate tonight. If you loved what we brought to you so far this week, and we have another night tomorrow night, please make a donation if you can. I understand some people are in tough situations right now, but if you have the ability, please donate. Thank you all for joining us. It's night 3. We've got one more night to go. I just might make it till then, but it's been great. It's been enlightening and wonderful. I'm going to be a Zoom expert. I love meeting people like you, Stacy.
You're doing great. This is unbelievable.
So thank you so much. Have a great evening. Have a great evening, everybody else. Thank you.